What's up, everyone? Jericho here. The WoW 20th Anniversary Update patch 11.05 is just around the corner, and I just wanted to make a quick video covering the changes that Evoker players can expect to see when the patch goes live this coming reset. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Blizzard is now making the Dracthyr race available to other classes, so if you're a hunter, rogue, priest, mage, warrior, or warlock, you'll finally be able to play as a Dracthyr in patch 11.05, complete with Wing Buffet, the Racial Mastery bonus, a slightly nerfed version of Glide, and the ability to cast your spells while in Visage form. Unfortunately for the Evoker players watching, who have been asking to be able to use their Visage form in combat, this only applies to the newly added classes. Evoker players will still automatically transform into their Dracthyr form when casting spells in combat. Sorry, Evokers. Better luck next time. Off the back of opening up Dracthyr to other classes, Evokers are getting some changes to their baseline spells and class tree as a result. Some good, and some not so good. To start off, the baseline cooldown of both Tail Swipe, the Knock Up, and Wing Buffet, the Knock Back, have been increased from 90 seconds to 3 minutes. Tail Swipe is also now considered an Evoker spell, rather than a Dracthyr spell, so that other classes only have access to Wing Buffet. Before we talk about how big of a nerf this actually is, we need to have a look at the changes to the class tree. First off, Permeating Chill, the movement speed slow from blue spells, has been removed from the class tree, and is now baseline for all Evokers. Additionally, Heavy Wing Beats and Clobbering Sweep, which are the cooldown reduction talents for Wing Buffet and Tail Swipe, are no longer a choice node, and also now reduce the cooldown of their respective spell by 2 minutes. Let's take a look at the talent tree to try and unpack what this means. So, Heavy Wing Beats, or the Wing Buffet cooldown reduction, is now where Permeating Chill used to be. Clobbering Sweep, or the Tail Swipe cooldown reduction, is now where the old choice node used to be. So what does this mean for Evoker talent builds? Well, Obsidian Bulwark gives the extra charge of Obsidian Scales, and is generally taken in 100% of Evoker builds for all 3 specs. This means that Heavy Wing Beats is essentially free, and all Evokers will generally enjoy a 1-minute cooldown on Wing Buffet. Tail Swipe's cooldown reduction is still trapped down here between Innate Magic and Enkindled, which are 2 very low value talents and cost 2 points each. This technically costs the same amount of talent points as before, but the cost of not taking Clobbering Sweep is now much more severe, with the cooldown twice as long as before, at 3 minutes. In terms of who these changes actually affect, if you're running content where you're using both Wing Buffet and Tail Swipe interchangeably and on cooldown, you can look at this as a slight buff overall, since having 2 60-second cooldowns is technically better than having one 45-second cooldown and one 90-second cooldown. That said, this probably does nerf high-end PvE players of all specs in 2 major ways. First off, Evoker players assigned to use Wing Buffet on Mythic Brood Twister Ovenox will now no longer be able to knock every set of parasites, as the new 1-minute cooldown is just too long. This job now requires either a Druid or 2 Evokers alternating. Additionally, Evokers in Mythic Plus tend to value Tail Swipe a bit more highly than Wing Buffet, because it's generally more useful to stop enemies in place rather than knocking them away. Mythic Plus players who are used to the 45-second cooldown on Tail Swipe will feel some pain here, and players who skipped Clobbering Sweep in favor of other utility nodes will now probably have to think twice. There are 2 more small changes to the talent tree. Number 1, Unravel's damage has been increased by 25%, which is definitely a welcome change. Devastation players will be pleased to know that Unravel now also benefits from and consumes Iridescence Blue, which is the capstone talent that gives you 20% damage bonus on blue spells. Unravel has been in a bit of a weird spot in the War Within, because it's essentially been power crept by other spec abilities, which actually have interactions with the new hero talent trees. In some cases, it's almost not worth casting at all. Now, with this buff, it should once again be the reliable single value global to use on priority shielded enemies by all 3 Evoker specs. Lastly, Renewing Blaze is no longer affected by healing received modifiers, both good and bad. Now, in my opinion, this isn't going to be particularly noticeable for most DPS Evokers using Renewing Blaze as a personal cooldown, but there have been moments this tier where Renewing Blaze has been used to great effect, particularly with Flame Shaper being able to use it as an external, and stacking with other strong effects. It should still be quite strong, especially in as a personal, even with this change. Now that's it for Evoker class changes, but before we go, I do want to highlight 2 recent changes for Augmentation Evoker that I'm still receiving questions about and that have some people a bit confused. First off, Imminent Destruction was just straight up buffed and lasts for 15 seconds instead of 12 seconds. This makes a lot of sense because it now lines up much better with your mastery buffed Breath of Eons window and Plot the Future's 15-second duration. It's very straightforward, not much else to say on that one. Now Molten Embers is the tricky one here. It now reads, Fire Breath causes enemies to take up to 40% increased damage from your black spells, increased based on its empower level. This used to be a flat 20%. So what exactly does this mean? Well, Blizzard noticed that Augmentation had some confusing rotational goals, where, on one hand, we'd like to up-rank Fire Breath for our burst damage and for Leaping Flames value. But that would cost us half our uptime on this big 20% damage bonus from Molten Embers. So instead, they've now normalized the value of the buff such that lower ranks have a weaker buff, and higher ranks now have a stronger buff based on the duration of the Fire Breath dot, so that it essentially evens out. So at rank 1, you're now actually getting a 10% buff for 24 seconds, while at rank 3, you're getting a 20% buff for 12 seconds. You're actually going to have to take Font of Magic and cast at rank 4 to get the full 40% outlined in the tooltip, but we're probably not taking Font of Magic anyway for the foreseeable future. Now, in terms of gameplay, this is why we don't really care about Fire Breath uptime anymore on Augmentation, and are still happy to cast our Fire Breaths at rank 3. As long as you're able to cast your Upheaval and spend most of your essence during that 12-second buff window, you're now essentially getting full value from the Molten Embers talent. It's only in situations where Upheaval is heavily desynced from Fire Breath where you even need to think about playing around Molten Embers. And only in those spots, you might decide to cast Fire Breath at a lower rank just to make sure your Upheaval damage is getting buffed. And one last time, just to be clear, these 2 changes are already active on live servers. It's just the tooltips that aren't being updated until the 11.05 patch goes live this coming reset. And that's about it. That's going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and check the video description for all sorts of links, like my community Discord, where you can get in touch, or even just come and hang out. So as always, take it easy, and have a good one.